exactly what the color is going to look like printed with that ink. Like you can actually take this, and I do this all the time, and stick it up against your job and make sure that that color is exactly right. And if it's not, then they have to redo it because as long as you did it right. so that's spot colors. So anyway, if you have an extra spot color, that's going to be an extra plate. If you do other special things, we're going to talk about different techniques that you can use, and each one of these makes a print job more expensive. You can add a varnish to your job, which is going to make it extra shiny or extra dull, depending on what kind of varnish it is. Like I'm doing a job right now for my job, where the cover of this booklet that I'm creating is a solid color, but I have words that are printed in a varnish. So it's kind of shimmery, like you don't see it until you kind of turn it the right way towards the light, and then you can see all these words printed on the cover that you can't really see in certain light because it's basically just a clear varnish. So that's one neat technique. You can do what's called a die cut, which is where once everything's printed off the press, they actually have a machine that cuts a certain area of the page. Like let's say you have a cover of a book and you want a hole through it so you can see the image on the page inside. That's called the die cut. Or maybe you want rounded corners on the cover. And they have this machine that's got all these different blades that automatically cuts every print job the same. You can also do embossing, which is where they create, let's say you're doing a logo, they'll create a little stamp of your logo and actually push through the paper to kind of make it pop out a little bit. You've probably seen that. I don't think I have any examples of that. I might. No, I don't have any examples of that. But anyway, then you can do foil stamping, which is kind of the same thing, only they use foil so you can get kind of a shiny effect. So all these are different techniques you can do. Whenever you're printing, and this kind of goes back to the pre-press thing, you also need to keep in mind what color paper you're going to use. Or not what color, but what kind of paper. There's lots of different finishes and what's called tooths of paper where, how smooth it is versus how much texture you have. Is it high gloss paper like this magazine, or is it going to be kind of a matte finish, M-A-T-T-E, sort of like I can't really see on here anyway. Anyway, matte finish is kind of it's duller, more natural looking. There's what's called silk, which is somewhere in between. There's lots of different finishes, and that's a big part of the job. Is contacting printing companies or paper companies actually are the best, or going to trade shows, whatever, and you get all these samples so you can see what kind of paper the different companies have, and they'll send you for free this whole big book that has samples and printing examples of all the different kinds of paper that they have, what different printing techniques are going to look like on paper. So they'll hook you up. Printing companies want your business, so they will send you lots of free stuff. And that's I have a drawer full of free stuff from printing companies. But anyway, so you need to think about the paper color, the texture, the color, the size, the quantity, and all that stuff. So that's how offset lithography works, pretty much in a nutshell. And that is like I said, a career in and of itself. If you wanted to be offset lithographer, work at a printing press, you would need a totally different set of knowledge than if you were going to be a graphic designer. Printing press is more working with your hands and actually making something as opposed to just designing something. So there's benefits and drawbacks to both of them. So there's another printing process, which is digital printing. And this is kind of coming up as the technology gets better and better. It's going to become more and more prevalent, and it might actually take over at some point. But that's going to be way in the future. Digital printing. I've actually attached a PDF that I found on the Xerox website. It's a brochure for one of their digital presses, and this is not your typical printer. It's not like something you have in an office or on your desk. It's not as big as an offset press, but it's big. It's still big. It's maybe a fourth of the size of that, so it's still longer than a car, probably. But anyway, so take a look at that and you can kind of get an idea of the differences between them. Digital presses are better for small quantities. And the reason for that is offset lithography, as we talk about, you have to create a plate for each color, and that takes a lot of time and effort. Once you create those plates, actually running them through the press is, pretty easy. Like you can, if say you need to get 1,000 printed of something, the difference between the price of printing 1,000 and printing 5,000 is not going to be that big. Like the difference is going to be bigger if you're printing digitally or something like that, because the paper is the main cost, the paper and the ink. But the plates and that whole process is more expensive, and actually running the paper through the press is pretty cheap. So if you have large quantities, offset printing is the way to go. Digital is better for small quantities because it's a lot quicker and cheaper and easier. Excuse me, because they don't have to create all these plates. Let's see. Digital printing at this point it's not as high quality as offset printing, just because of the technology is still in process. You can get really good quality digital printing, but usually offset lithography is going to last a little bit longer. It's going to be a little more durable to the elements, sun and rain and all that, wind. Another thing about digital printing is it is all CMYK. If you want spot colors, to my knowledge, I could be wrong. This technology is moving so fast, but to my knowledge, you cannot use spot colors with digital printing because, spot color is actually especially mixed ink. So unless you had some kind of, Pantone print cartridge, which they might have, but I haven't heard of it, then basically they're just reproducing that spot color in the CMYK. And there's always a chance for a slight shift. Like they're very, they pay a lot of attention to spot colors to make sure that they're, represented accurately, but you're better, you're guaranteed accuracy if you go to a press with a spot color, usually, unless it's just a crappy printer. So that's pretty much it for printing. Let's see. We talked about PrePress, we talked about printing, two different kinds. PrePress, preparing your files, collecting them, checking the color, the resolution, bleed, page layout, depending on the binding. Two kinds of binding, perfect binding and saddle stitching. Digital printing versus offset lithography. And that's pretty much it. So, that's all I got. Let's talk real quick about your test, your final exam, I guess. This is going to be over the past 3 weeks. So we're going to cover software and the printing processes. Everything that I test you on is going to be something that is either in my lecture or on the files that I attached with the lecture. Most of it will be from my lectures. But if most of the files are just examples of what you could do with the software, or in this case, you could actually see the printing process or see what a digital press looks like. So I will upload that test. I'm not sure how it's going to work yet. I don't know how Blackboard does this. I've never actually done a test through Blackboard. So I guess it'll be multiple choice or something like that. I don't know how many questions. But I will put that up, and you have until next Wednesday at midnight to turn it in. You can do it. You can turn it in tomorrow if you want to, however you want to do it. But it has to be in by next Wednesday at midnight, or you will not get credit for it. That's the way it works. That being said, that's pretty much all I got. It's easy to get frustrated because there's so much stuff in the field of graphic design. We're talking about printing and software and fundamental design elements and principles and how to create good design, the concept and all this stuff, copywriting. But I hope that you've gotten a good introduction to that. I highly encourage you to continue your education, and like as I've said all semester, you only get out what you put in. So really, if you're interested in this, really attack it and learn everything you can. I've been in this business for 15 years, or almost 15 years, and I'm still learning every day. So I've had fun with you this semester. Best of luck to you. I'll see you soon.